This isn't the type of video that I would normally do, but it's been in the back of my mind for a while now, and I think it's long overdue that I actually got around to it. And after all, this channel isn't just about the games or the motorbikes or anything else, it's about me and who I am. And I will say that this is probably one of the first times I've talked about this in detail, or at least publicly anyway. Now, it's become a bit of a cliche that YouTubers talk about depression, but it's all too easy to think of it as just clickbait. I think it is fairly prevalent, but I also think a lot of it is underlying way before anyone steps in front of the camera for the first time. Just as a little bit of background information, I do have a diploma in psychology, a bachelor's in criminology and psychological studies, and vocational certifications in psychology and well-being. So these aren't just my personal ramblings, they are also somewhat of my professional observations as well. I really need to stress, though, that I had a happy childhood. I came from a good, loving home. We were reasonably well off. I had good friends. I did everything that I wanted to do. But that's the thing with depression. It can hit anyone. Like most people, my depression started to come out when I was a teenager. I'd always been quite a chubby kid growing up, but when you become a teenager, that stuff starts to become more and more important, especially when it comes to the idea of relationships. But for me, it wasn't that, it was something else. I'd always been just okay at things, like with football, for example. I was an okay footballer, and I guess I was an above average goalkeeper. As in my early 20s, I actually was briefly in trials with the England beach soccer team, but that didn't go very well, and that's a different story. But the thing is that I never had anything that made me stand out, anything that was my thing. And that's actually where racing came in. There's a lot of stuff that I don't speak about when it comes to racing, and that's partly because I never considered myself capable of becoming any kind of athlete. And then all of a sudden, it was a possibility. But what to do when you're the fat kid? That's when the bulimia started. I don't think it was the only trigger, but I remember they were pretty close to each other, and I was probably, I don't know, 16 or 17, and I lost about 40 pounds in the space of a couple of months. And I don't know if I ever really got over that. I never had therapy for that. I never went through anything like that. I kind of just stopped. I had kind of had almost like an intervention with my mum, and it just ended, and I don't really know how I got over that. But at the end of that summer, I went to Silverstone Motorsport Academy to really start my journey and to do my racing license. I didn't even bother going to pick up my exam results. I sent my girlfriend instead. I mean, I was fairly confident anyway, but I didn't really get the grades, and I didn't really get the grades that I needed, and I also failed my racing license. And actually, you know what, as I never really got to say it at the time, I should say that my girlfriend at that time was great to me, and we really did have an amazing relationship. It ended quite badly and was somewhat of a trigger for health issues, but that's definitely not her fault. We don't really talk anymore, but we've kind of cleared the air. But there is something a little bit underlying there, and there probably always will be. But when I was in university, I became very ill. I was practically nocturnal. I was actually really suffering. I was having cancer screenings, blood tests, and I actually ended up having either a heart attack or a heart attack-like event. I don't actually remember exactly what it was. I was talked through it at the time, but it was about I don't know, 1 in the morning, and I don't really think that my brain was really on record at the time. It's hard to remember how scared I was at the time. I'd lost both of my grandmothers to cancer. My uncle was diagnosed and died of cancer all in the space of 6 months. And, you know, I'll never forget being sat in specialist waiting rooms waiting for ultrasounds and probes. And I don't think I've ever felt, you know, ironic juxtaposition as much as I have sat next to an expectant mother. You know, both of us awaiting an ultrasound as she was bringing new life into the world, and I was potentially finding out whether my life was going to be cut short. Thankfully, it was all clear in the end. But it was my housemates at uni, it was my uni friends that got me through it by staying up late with me, spending nights in uncomfortable hospital rooms, sitting with me, playing video games all night, and helping me study for my exams. Both my housemates and also friends that lived in other houses and on campus. But I left university after my second year to finish studying from home. It'd been a hard year, and there had been a lot of stuff to go through, which is not that surprising. And I also got my first job working as a barman in a hotel. I passed my racing license eventually, but by that point I'd already realised that any avenue into it being a career was long gone, despite having close connections with people in Formula One. And the knowledge and the connections, they did actually help me in my later career when working for Top Gear and for Fast and Furious, etc. But obviously I wasn't to know it at the time. But I do, I remember I actually lied on my medical exam for my license, as they probably wouldn't have let me race had I told them the truth. I don't think I've ever felt fear like lining up for my first race in Formula One after the health issues that I'd had and the rain, just pouring down so hard that it was, God knows how many times I spun off the track that weekend. But after my degree, after the racing, I felt like I needed to reinvent myself and start fresh. So I moved to London, and I really started to feel like I was getting my life back on track. My career was going great. I was healthier. I met my wife, and we got married a few years later. But depression can come back around. And while I've been able to work freelance with some amazing names recently, I've partly put it down to the fact that I took a big gamble and lost. I was working for Sega at the time, and I loved it, but it was quite far from home, and for the sake of my marriage, which was still new, I chose to leave and take a job close to home. It seemed like the right thing to do until I realised that the new company hadn't actually really got any plans on how to use me and hadn't even really budgeted for me, which made it a little bit difficult to justify paying me. Now that would have been okay had I at least been given a month's notice, like you're meant to give before being let go. Instead, I was given 40 minutes notice, which played into my biggest fear, which was always failure. It didn't matter what came before it, I'd always focus on that particular failure, which is why my channel is so important to me, my YouTube channel is so important to me. Everyone needs a form of escapism, but it's really important that that escapism is non-destructive. I could overeat, I could get drunk, I could take drugs, I could self-harm, or I could come in here and play a video game, or watch some 90s wrestling, pop in a VHS or something. Therapy was useless for me, as I felt like the therapist was giving me advice straight out of the same psychology textbook that I'd used years before. But it took 6 months until the money was all gone. Everything. All bank accounts at their limits, and no idea how we were going to eat, pay our bills, or even afford to get to job seekers every 2 weeks. But this is actually where our paths cross, as this was all going on while making content for this channel. I didn't talk about it at the time, but it was going on in the background. The thing is, ultimately, the reason why I bring all of this up is because it's incredibly important to remember that there are more people struggling than you realise. We live in an age of social media. YouTube is a form of social media, and it's all well and good posting the positives in your life, but we rarely share the negatives. I don't even sit in front of the camera here without cutting my hair and having a shave, putting contact lenses in, because I want to portray a certain image. But we've become so good at editing our lives that we don't realise that no one's life is as good as it seems through the computer screen or the smartphone screen. Not everyone is living the dream life that their Facebook, YouTube or Instagram would suggest that they are. The way to get through it is to just keep moving forward. It's a hard thing to accept, but being stuck in depression is a selfish thing. It's all too easy to think that you have nothing or that your life is not what you wanted it to be. But you need to be able to snap yourself out of that. And the only person that can really do that for you is you. You know, it gets to a point where you just end up saying life either goes on or it doesn't. You're either going to kill yourself or get on with something. And trust me, the former isn't an option, because life is always worth living. No one is too far gone. I'd recommend watching The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. Whether you're a wrestling fan or not, you should watch it. But I feel like I'll struggle with depression all of my life, to a certain degree anyway. But I need to remember that I do have a good life, and I have things that I can share, hence why I have this channel. But I can do it in real life as well. That's why I try to open up the studio here to people around us. You know, I might not have everything I wanted in life, but and you know, we really struggle for money sometimes as well. But I have a lot, and I have an amazing wife that has let me build the studio, because she recognises that this is part of my profession, for one thing, but also a means of getting on. She also sees it as a blessing that we can share with others, you know, the same as our beautiful husky as well, and our charitable work as well. You know, whatever it may be, we are able to help others get through their depression. We're there as a testimony for others, regardless of whether we're going through a bad patch or not. You know, depression can often be about it can come about when you see your life as going in a certain way, or being dedicated to one particular thing, and when that thing is taken away from you, you don't often know what to do. I've had to reinvent myself so many times, and you know, just take a walk through this studio and you will see a million different interests, admittedly most of them geeky, but you'll see, you know, racing helmets, wrestling belts, video games, trophies from all sorts of things. When I don't know how to move forward, I'll throw myself back into something in here. Now, I'm not a shining example of how to get over depression, not by a long shot. And a lot of the time, knowing that others are worse off than you, and the fact that you still feel as bad as you do, it only makes things worse. You know, you can really, you can hate yourself for that. The only real way of combating it are through community and diving into your interests. Hence, why you'll see a lot of YouTubers who are trying to cope with depression. They need that sense of community and exploration of their interests to get through something difficult. Now, you know, I don't know whether this video, this is going to be help for anyone. I don't know what sort of purpose it will serve, but this is me. And, you know, I'm happy to talk to anyone about this kind of thing. You know, you can get through to me in the comment section, or, you know, you can private message me on Twitter. It's always in the description. You can go to our website and send, you can do a contact me form. Again, the link's in the description. I'm always, you know, open for discussion about that kind of thing. And, you know, if ultimately it helps somebody, then great. If it doesn't, at least, you know, for those that are watching this channel, you kind of understand a bit more about who I am and why this channel is so important to me. But until next time, guys, I'll see you later.